Welcome everybody. Hope everybody's on. Thanks for taking time out of your work day, probably from home, and how relevant that is for this topic. So this webinar between BGI, MGI, and Task Force Lab, hopefully it's going to work out well. We've got a handful of folks scattered across the country to make this possible. So we're certainly hoping to avoid any technical issues that result in meme-worthy misadventures. So, by the end of the seminar, we hope you'll have a pretty good idea about how one partner company, TfL, deploys BGI, MGI technology to get people back to work. And moreover, by the end of the presentation, hopefully there's a better understanding about how you can access this technology in the context of our clinical lab partnership program. While our company seeks to enable population level testing globally, the focus of this webinar is going, which is the first in a series, is going to be focusing on how TfL currently implements very effective COVID testing workflows for clients, primarily here in the US. In terms of, and then there's just a little bit of table setting here, in terms of how this is supposed to work, we're expecting to speak, Erik and I, for about 20 minutes each. And if there are questions that attendees have, please send them in on the Q&A button. We've got a team of people who will be triaging those questions as we go along. We won't be taking those during the course of the webinar, but we have 20 minutes of Q&A at the end of the session. And then if we can't get to all of the questions, then we're going to get back to you one way or another. That's our commitment to all of those joining the webinar. So I would say with that, next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the head of Global Commercial Partnerships, and we've been working a lot on COVID since the pandemic really became a severe issue in the US in February, March, and since then we've been working with a number of partners to enable testing in this country, whether it's governments or private sector folks. We as a technology company need partners like Erik at TfL to enable the sort of testing that needs to be done. And with that, I'd like Erik maybe to introduce himself before I continue on with the rest of my conversation.
Absolutely. I'm Erik Bogaard. I'm the founding partner at Task Force Lab. We're based in Southern California, and we provide full service COVID-19 testing for the community.
Great, thank you, Erik. Next slide. So for the agenda today, we're going to get a little bit into what we think is going to happen coming up here in fall, winter, where we are in terms of the pandemic. As mentioned in the introduction, we do want to make mention of a clinical lab partnership program, especially for those of you on the phone who are labs and are seeking technologies and maybe have concerns about some of your existing technologies. And then, very soon after that, what we'd like to do is apply real scenarios, real work scenarios that TfL has solved using the technology. So this is not intended to be a technology discussion, although we have folks ready to handle those questions at the end. It's meant to be more of a case study webinar about how TfL did deploy the technology and either got people to work or made sure people at work remained there safely. The one from my perspective, very interesting case study was actually a beach volleyball championship that took place, I think, a month or so ago, and that event went off very well. Everybody was safe, it was successful, and Erik will speak to that. Next slide. So the image to the right of the screen highlights the fact that if probably things are deteriorating somewhat in the US, the need for testing certainly needs to increase. If you're doing community level testing, either in literally in your community or if it's a workplace community, the numbers suggest that the level of testing is going to have to increase, and we'll want to speak to that. The image to the left shows an Amazon tech. They posted this just a few days ago, working with one of our instruments in their lab. they're taking the pandemic so seriously that they intend to, for their own employees, do 50,000 tests a day. That's the sort of model that we're willing to enable. I think what's really interesting about the TFL model is that they enable multiple sectors, and we get into that a little bit later. Next slide. So some of the key issues that labs are facing, they're multifold, and hopefully, again, if you're a lab on this webinar, you're not facing all of these at the same time. Supplies have been an issue throughout the pandemic. They continue to be an issue, and they're set to become worse. We actually have BGI, MGI, near limitless supplies onshore in our warehouses in San Jose. And again, we'll get into what those supplies are, but in terms of extraction and detection supplies, we're ready to help up. Obviously, we just made the point that probably the level of testing will need to increase with the high throughput systems that we have. We can certainly make sure that labs can scale, whether it's to 1,000 tests a day, up to 10,000, or in the Amazon example, even up to 50,000 plus. So that's all possible. And we do all of this. We work with labs to help with their infrastructure and with the support necessary to keep labs running once we get them set up. That's ready to go. Next slide. So as mentioned, we did announce this program, and I'm happy to say that Erik and TFL were founding members, joined with us very, very quickly, recognizing the urgency of testing in the midst of this pandemic. So we did announce this to make other labs who wanted to avail themselves of our technologies, make them aware that this sort of support actually existed, and the workflow, the technology that we provide is covered by the US FDA, EUA. Obviously, to successfully collect a test and ultimately deliver a result requires more than just extraction and detection, and that's the part that Erik will talk about. Next slide. So I think this slide highlights some of the points I've already made as we've gone through this. We've just seen so many companies and labs struggle with supply. So for those of you listening and having issues, not only do we have supply now, over at the beginning of this third wave, but we believe we have enough supply to keep our partners running tests throughout the next 3 to 6 months as we move into the flu season. All of the equipment and reagents that we're providing are covered by the EUA with the original authorization in March, and we expanded that authorization to include additional extraction technologies as well as PCR cyclers. And so that makes it very easy for labs to adopt the technology, enable the sort of testing they're looking to deliver. The instrument, the 960, is a high throughput liquid handler, which helps you achieve the scale that you need to get to if you're seeking to do potentially thousands of samples per day. Next slide. I think we've covered most of this. When we think about the sorts of labs with whom we've successfully engaged, here are some of the attributes that we've seen in terms of labs that are successful with the technology and the testing. A lot of the labs in the country have struggled with turnaround time. If folks are getting results, 7 days and beyond, that becomes problematic. TFL will deliver results within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the situation. And we've seen other labs, who are taking this pretty seriously, also deliver results in that sort of time frame, depending on the scenario. Obviously, the labs are fully aware of HIPAA compliance, and for a complete solution for end user clients, having a mobile app or post-testing support, things of that nature tend to be very, very critical. BGI, MGI, we don't ever touch the samples. We never touch the data. That's what the lab does, and some of our other third-party partners when it comes to collection to enable that entire workflow. And Erik will get a little bit more into that when he talks about how TFL solves some of the problems they've solved on behalf of some other customers. Next slide. So we've hit on some of the reasons for joining a program like this. Obviously, we're willing to enable testing anywhere in the U.S. as long as the lab is properly certified and accredited. But you can see some of the highlights, beyond just a transactional, customer vendor relationship. And with some partners, we've actually worked with them to respond to government, statewide RFPs, for instance, or even municipal requests for proposal. We've referred a lot of testing projects to these partner labs. Obviously, once at volume and with a high throughput system such as ours, pricing becomes pretty attractive relative to what we've seen out there. And I would say it's important to comment on the support that we are still sending people out. Whenever there's an issue or if there's a need to expand, for instance, we do have people that we're still sending out, and we've actually had people for major projects stay on site for a month or more. So that level of support is very integral to this sort of program. And in terms of the sales and marketing resources, we do help partners in terms of, as mentioned, get the sorts of projects to get them to scale. And we also make available new technologies. For this webinar, we're talking about instruments and we're talking about kits, but we also make available for those labs developing their own LDTs. We make available the enzymes and the buffers and the master mixes to actually help them put together their own testing solutions if that's what a lab wants to accomplish. Next slide. So as mentioned, we as a technology company just do the sort of the middle piece of that workflow, the RNA extraction and the prep. And as mentioned, if it's not a kit that a partner is interested in, if they're looking for the components, that's something we make possible as well. Maybe Erik, let me turn this over to you since you actually work with the entire workflow, beyond just our technology in the context of how you enable a client with something like this.
Yeah, so this is a really good overview slide of really what Task Force Lab does. And taking a quick step back, when COVID really became front and center for the United States in particular and the region more directly, we started Task Force Lab after talking with hospitals, government agencies, private industry businesses, and understanding what their needs were. And in particular, the need for access to reliable COVID-19 testing was an issue back then, and it still frankly is today, as probably everyone on the call is well aware. And so when we got started, we realized the glaring kind of gap was the need for on-site testing. Senior living facilities, businesses, they needed testing brought to them versus patients going out of their homes, especially with senior living facilities. So this summary slide really encapsulates what Task Force Lab does, from collecting the samples wherever the client needs us to do so. We bring them to the lab. We rely exclusively on the BGI, MGI end-to-end solution from within the lab standpoint. So we're using the automation instrument to prepare the samples, as well as the kits to run on the PCR instruments. And then we've built a full service reporting platform for our clients. And we also rely heavily on partners to provide results directly to patients, as you see in the analysis and reporting column.
That's great. Thanks for that. And I think you'll be able to speak even more to that in the context of specific examples in a little bit here. Next slide, please. So yeah, as promised, this is not intended to be a technology-specific webinar. That said, of course, the technology drives a lot of the performance, and in light of even recent news, obviously, specificity and sensitivity of your detection assay is incredibly important. So with our SARS-CoV-2 assay, which TFL has deployed, not only is it covered by the US FDA EUA, but the accuracy or performance of the kit itself is world-class relative to other assays, whether in-house LDTs, et cetera, based on real-time PCR technology, which is very important to answer certain questions. And when deployed in an automated workflow, the turnaround times can really be pretty spectacular. You can get through the entire workflow, the extraction to detection piece within 3 to 4 hours, depending on how you implement. Next slide. So that's the liquid handler again. That was the liquid handler you saw in the earlier slide in the Amazon lab. Obviously, they have a whole army of these things to achieve 50,000 tests a day. We have some technical folks working on the webinar in the background. So if there are questions about throughput and the arms and volume, things of that nature, we can handle that during the Q&A session. Next slide. So that concludes my section within the 20 minutes, surprisingly. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Erik and see how this technology is making a difference in terms of real world testing here in the US.
Great. Yeah, so I think with Jeremy's summary of the technology in mind, the hope is to now kind of shift the attention to how Task Force Lab in particular, as one of the partner labs, relies upon this technology in order to make testing more readily available in the United States. And so, as I said previously, we're based in Los Angeles and Pasadena, California. Back in March, we were in conversation trying to figure out how we could be helpful to the community, talking with hospitals, government agencies, et cetera. The need for reliable testing was of a top concern for folks. And the next step that we took was to identify the best path forward for us in order to move quickly in a pandemic. That really led us to finding BGI MGI as a reliable partner from a supply chain perspective. And we're excited about working with them since then. So we can go to the next slide, please. Our focus is really helping businesses get back to work, helping bring testing on site to individuals who can't get to public testing locations. When we got started in March, the local counties here in Los Angeles and Orange County had really started to step up and make drive-through testing available. And so what we identified as the need at that point was going out into the field and collecting tests from senior living facilities, so assisted care, independent living, assisted living, patients, as well as frontline workers. Increasingly, as the months have passed and it appears as if we need to learn to somewhat live with COVID, more businesses have reached out that are reopening but want to do it in a safe way. As you can see on this slide from Salesforce research, workplace health and safety is really the number one factor that people consider when they talk about going back to work. And so for us, being able to go to where the client needs us and provide regular testing for them really helps provide tremendous peace of mind for our clients. Next slide, please. So really, to summarize what Task Force Lab does, as Jeremy was indicating, we provide a complete end-to-end solution where we coordinate the on-site collection of the patient specimen. We work with trained medical personnel who are deployed out into the field. We transport those samples directly to the lab. We've partnered with both the CLIA and CAP accredited lab that's local to the Southern California area. We are able to drop the samples off, run the tests there in the lab, and of course, return the results within 24 to 48 hours to our clients. We have done it with several clients who needed slightly faster results, but consistently the lab is turning around results within 24 to 48 hours, which is really a pillar of what we do. In particular, unlike other labs, we actually take an approach where we reserve and allocate daily testing volume. So what we tell our clients is they don't have to vie for the daily position or be concerned about sending their test kits back around the same time that others will as well and entering a queue. We instead work with our partners and our clients to understand their needs, and we schedule their testing volume. So if a client says they need 100 tests or 1,000 tests in a particular day, we make sure that those tests are expected by the lab and processed when they are received. Next slide, please. We've started in California. We're working in both Southern California as well as Northern California. And very quickly, we've now started talking with individuals across the country to really provide more testing ultimately. Next slide, please. So when we were starting Task Force Lab, a big consideration for us was making sure that we had a stable supply chain. Obviously, that's important in March, and it's equally as important today going into the flu season. We actually had heard from many labs at the time that were up and running early on with COVID-19 testing, and they were struggling with supply chain of not only the reagents and extraction kits, but then also the swabs and everything else that goes along with it. And so when we found BGI, MGI, we were immediately impressed by their global position as a leader in the space, their supply chain, the fact that they have supplies already here in the United States that made it very accessible to us, and it was a pretty easy decision. As Jeremy mentioned, we've opted to really go all the way with BGI, MGI in terms of the reagents as well as the extraction. We have purchased one of the automation instruments as well, and BGI has been a great partner as we scaled up our operations as well in terms of not only access to the automation instrument, but then also to additional PCR instruments. Next slide, please. So the competitive advantages of Task Force Labs approach really come down to the availability. We work with our clients in order to set up a full service on-site testing operation. So imagine being at senior living facilities where it's very important that both the residents are tested frequently as well as the individuals, the frontline workers that are going from room to room. And so what we've been able to do is provide that peace of mind of being there as scheduled on a regular basis and providing rapid results. It allows them to move quickly and do everything they can to avoid any potential outbreaks. Quality is a very high importance, as those who are on the call are probably well aware. It's one of the first questions we get when we're talking to new clients. They want to know the tests we're running. They want to know what the statistics are on that test. Consistently, we were able to share the information about the BGI test, and it impresses those who read more about it, and it helps us ultimately get more clients on board because it checks that very important box. Timeliness is also very important. When we started, we were already hearing from hospitals that they were waiting 7 to 9, 10 days for results. That obviously causes an operational nightmare. And so when we started Task Force Lab, we set out to do it in a way that we allocate daily testing. So again, we not only deliver within 48, but in many cases we deliver within 24, or certainly within that 24 to 48 hour mark. And then of course the expectation of being both CLIA and CAP accredited. We work with our partner lab who in fact has both. Next slide, please. So over the course of several months, which I think feels like a lifetime, I think Jeremy would agree, we've worked with several industries already. So we started with nursing homes, assisted living, senior living. We quickly started to move in as businesses reopened to work with independent businesses that needed their employees to be in their office for a variety of reasons. So we started doing regular weekly testing with them. Through word of mouth, we ended up started working with a professional sports league, the Association of Professional Volleyball Players, and entertainment. Being in Southern California, they've started to reopen. We've worked with several production companies in conversations with schools as well as government agencies that are looking to continue testing through the end of the year and into next year. And we're excited to continue to grow with BGI, MGI as we need to expand our capacity. Next slide, please. So the case study that Jeremy alluded to earlier is with the AVP. Every year the AVP has their Champions Cup Series. And this year, while they were not allowed to have in-person spectators, they were able to put the event on with some requirements that were enforced upon them. And so they reached out to us. We partnered with them, and we were responsible for providing all of their testing on a weekly basis. We tested over 388 athletes and staff. It went on for over a month. There were 0 positive cases, and 100% of the results were known within 24 to 48 hours. So that was really important for them because, of course, they had the logistics of having to coordinate matches and the games themselves. And if the results were in any way delayed, then they wouldn't be able to proceed as scheduled. It was nationally televised on NBC, and so it was a great opportunity for us to work with an incredible partner. Al Lau at AVP and his team are really top-notch folks, and we enjoyed working with them. And thankfully, the event went off without a hitch. Next slide, please.
Is beyond the volleyball, is there? Would you want to get into any more depth there, or cover a different one? If you're comfortable, I'm happy to move on to the next slide, and then we just have more time for Q&A. Your call, Erik.
I think one other example, just to kind of go back to senior living, that's been a very rewarding industry for us to serve. They were in need very, very early on. It was very clear that they were not getting access to testing that they needed in order to do everything they could to keep their residents and the frontline workers safe. And so I think that just to kind of highlight as a whole, that industry and the partners that we've worked with, were there every week in many cases, testing and providing rapid results and doing everything that we can to help empower them to keep the facility safe and COVID free. Increasingly, we've started to work with production companies, which are also great partners to have. It's a little bit different in terms of the expectation, and we were happy to be able to do our part to help get that industry back to work, and again in a safe way. Yeah, I think at this point, if there's anything more that you'd like to talk about from the BGI MGI standpoint, Jeremy, we can do that, as well as go to any questions that folks may have.
All right, I'd say, well, great. Thanks again. In terms of the technologies that I know you and I have talked about, and without getting into the sorts of details that we promised not to get into, I almost have to remind myself of that. But we have technologies around sample transfer, right? An instrument that handles that component of the workflow. And I know when at a certain throughput level that could become relevant. And I know that we've had conversations about different biological matrices that are becoming of interest. So for instance, saliva in the context of another group that's seeking creative or novel ways to get their folks back to work. And I know you're working with partners on that front as well. So it's not just the nasopharyngeal swab. If there's a client that's interested in at-home collection for saliva, that's the sort of thing I think that you guys are really pioneering to enable a broad range of clients to, as mentioned, either get back to work or stay safely at work.
Exactly. And I think that the expectation is there from the clients. Everybody has access to a variety of news sources, and so they're reading the headlines and seeing how the industry is evolving. And so, yeah, we're at the lab level. They're hard at work right now. So that's why I'm here, being able to help kind of speak to everything that's happening, but certainly we can already provide a variety of swabbing methods, nasopharyngeal, oropharyngeal, obviously others that are included in the EUA, but saliva has come up. It's come up fairly often. I know that that's something that the lab is actively looking into. I would also add that in order to make testing available, it goes beyond what happens, of course, in the four walls of the lab. We lean heavily on BGI, MGI to make that happen. And in addition to that, we've kind of come across our own needs in terms of technology for the clients. We started in March with pen and paper, as I think most labs have, and very quickly we've actually built up an entire custom technology platform which our clients rely upon in order for registration electronically. Everyone's able to register one time. They get a QR code. They can use that QR code as many times as they'd like, each patient, when they need to get tested in a kind of a repeat environment. We've also developed capabilities for our clients to have visibility into who's registered, who's been swabbed, when the last time they were swabbed. That helps really the client have peace of mind and understand that if they have a large group of people, like a production company or a senior living facility, and they're doing testing on a particular day, they're able to make sure that people are being tested when they're supposed to be. And then once the result is known, as I mentioned earlier, we've provided our clients with an electronic portal through which they can not only view the results, but they can also make sure that their patients and their employees in this case also receive their results directly electronically to their own devices. So we actually work with a partner named HealthVana that's a leader in the space as it relates to direct-to-patient reporting. They've sent out over 1.5 million patient results, I believe, last time I was updated, both through email and text. So really the idea is that it comes down to providing the clients with the availability of reliable testing, which BGI, MGI makes possible through the supply chain, but then also giving them an overarching experience that doesn't result them to be bogged down in Excel spreadsheets trying to reconcile results once they are known.
So, as mentioned at the top of the hour here, this is the first webinar that we've done, and certainly very grateful to Erik and the TFL team to join us for this experiment and provide this content. So I guess this is a plug for the second webinar, which is going to take place in a couple of weeks. The information will be either you can contact us directly, but it'll be advertised on Genome Web, LinkedIn. You probably even Google search it, but it's Sinai Health in Canada, and in Toronto. Actually, the last part of my screen is blocked there, so I'm pretty sure it's Toronto. But it's going to be all Sinai Health, but it's going to be 2 different sessions and hosted by our general manager of Canada there, Stephen. So next time around, if you join us again on the 20th, you'll have Stephen hosting and moderating, and you'll have 3 guests from Mount Sinai Hospital in Canada. So hopefully that one goes very smoothly. And that team will be covering a somewhat different topic. So we intend to have a different angle with regard to COVID testing for each of these seminars. And the third seminar, which will be 2 weeks after that, in early November after the election, we'll be covering more specifically applications around other biological matrices, including saliva. So that's the intent with this webinar series going forward. Next slide, please. Oops. Great. So obviously we don't have to linger on a thank you slide, but it's an opportunity to for us to, again, show our appreciation that you've spent the time with us during your workday. I mean, this event has been recorded, and we will have it posted on our website, so the information will be available. If you either want to listen to it again or send it to a colleague, that should be available. And of course, our contact information is on this slide. Email's probably the best way to go. If this is too fast for some folks to jot down, as I said, it's going to be recorded. You'll be able to get that. And the intent here is, if we can't get to your questions, somebody will follow up with you. We're hoping within 24 to 48 hours to answer your question. And of course, if there's interest in either the technologies BGI MGI offers, or if there's hopefully interest in the services that Erik talked about, that TFL handles, whether it's collection, reporting, et cetera, then feel free to go directly to Erik. So if it's a technology question in the heart of what BGI MGI does, then please send it my way. If it's other parts of the workflow or the services, or how to go about handling certain business case scenarios and how to solve them, then I think Erik is going to be a great place to go. And if you want, definitely feel free to send the message to both of us. Next slide. So one of the first questions I see it's for Erik, and I like it. What's the secret sauce? That's always a good way to start it. What's the secret sauce for getting results within 24 to 48 hours? How do you get it done?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so for us, the way that we do it is we start by allocating daily testing volume. So we don't overbook our daily testing volume, so that when the tests are received at the lab is more or less expecting them. And then importantly, once they arrive at the lab, we use the automation instrument made available by MGI to prepare the samples. And then we have multiple PCR instruments to ensure a high throughput each day. So there you go. Our secret is out. We don't overbook.
Yeah. All right. Good. I like the secret sauce question. Okay, so another question is it's for BGI MGI with regard to technology. I'd mentioned flu season, concern about supply. I think you and I addressed that. This question actually is about the availability of a multiplex COVID flu AB assay. So I can answer that one. And the quick answer is yes, we will have a test available. Actually, we just had some positive information that we've received CE-IVD mark on that, and a version of that assay is going to be available in the U.S. Very, very soon. So I would say, for more details, feel free to contact us on that. Obviously, I guess the one comment I'd make there is, seemingly the FDA has a lot going on, and the authorization process just across the board has been a little bit slow. So we'll be able to make the test available, and we're optimistic about EUA at any time. So I've got a question. It's an interesting one. I'll call this one a jump ball, Erik. This is from Franco. What do you think on swab pooling as a way to save money?
Well, I think so. The short answer from our lab partners' perspective is we're not yet doing any pooled testing. However, it has been a topic of conversation in order to also help get results back to clients faster. And I know that the lab is going through its internal processes to see if that might be a viable approach. Jeremy, how about your perspective on pooled testing?
So obviously, as a technology company, we stay within the limits of the EUA. That said, obviously the industry is aware that pooling can make sense in certain environments, and I believe the FDA itself has weighed in certain circumstances that probably makes sense. I guess my quick personal comment on it is that in an environment, or let's make it a business case. We were talking with a cruise line. For confidentiality reasons, we can't get into the specifics there, but the cruise line was interested in pooling because they were going to get, 5, 10, 15, 20 people coming together as a group at a time. And so basically, their thinking was, it wasn't so much driven by saving money. It was, well, if anybody tests positive in that group, then probably that group wouldn't want to get on the boat, and maybe the cruise line wouldn't want that group of people on the boat. So that makes sense in certain environments, but that's my thinking on pooling. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so I've got another question. This one's for Jeremy. So lab partnerships seem to be competitive for CLIA labs. Actually, this will be interesting to get your take as well, Eric. How can you explain how these partnerships work out, and if you're enabling competitors? I guess my quick answer to that is there's so much testing need in the company that really the more testing available, the better. It's not that, for instance, by Eric having you on this webinar, all of a sudden you're going to soak up all of the potential, partners testing. I guess that would be my view, is that, just enabling population level testing in this country is the moral objective and the right thing to do. And I think the more labs we have doing the testing, the better off we are as a country. What do you think?
Yeah, I would second that. I think that the need for testing is far greater in this country than any two labs can ultimately provide. And I think by working collaboratively and working with BGI, MGI, and I think this kind of dovetails to the next question that just came in, it looks like from Anthony as well. I can speak to our experience. Anthony asks about supply of detection and extraction kits. And asks about the availability of local supply and how fast he might receive them in the United States. And from our experience, when we need test kits, we reach out directly to the BGI team, and we have those kits as long as we act accordingly and let them know with advance notice, we'll get them next day. As long as we reach out in the morning, those will be sent to us overnight, and they'll arrive before 10:30 in the morning. So again, that goes back to the commitment that we make as Task Force Lab to our clients and our partners. Many of them are operating budgets that are into the tens of millions of dollars, and they rely upon testing to come back in a timely manner. And in return, we rely upon BGI and MGI for that supply chain. So I can speak from experience, Anthony, that the delivery time is very quick, and from what we've seen, it does appear limitless. Jeremy, if you can add more color on that, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I'm getting teased maybe about my choice of words there with limitless, but I guess the non-marketing hyperbole behind that statement would be that we have a warehouse in San Jose, Northern California, really stocked to the gills with the instruments, the extraction kits, as well as the detection kits, and that's why we're able to reliably deliver in most instances within 24 hours. So everything's already onshore, and we made that decision a couple months ago, especially in advance of flu season, to stock up like that, just because there were already shortages in the industry, and we're concerned that there's going to be an exacerbation with the upcoming season, and so we just wanted to make sure that we could keep testing going for labs and partner labs if things do deteriorate. A question for Eric. Actually, it sounds like you can see the questions yourself, right?
Yeah, I can see this one now. So there's another question that came in asking about what TFL charges for testing. So really, it depends on the client needs. Some clients ask that we show up and provide the medical personnel. Others ask that we provide the kits, and they provide their own collection personnel. So it really just varies based upon what exactly the client needs us to do. And then in terms of volume, so while we don't disclose the day-to-day volume, we are having a record week this week. And we're actually in the process of further scaling up our capacity to support the demand that we're experiencing. Again, an area where Jeremy and his team have been very, very helpful. And this is important. It's really beyond their own supply chain, but also it dovetails into the supply chain from other global companies, leaders in their space. And so availability of PCR instruments as one example has been very helpful for us as we ramp up our capacity.
Okay, so I've got another one here, and now I'm going to tap into our technical team. So Adam, I predict this is going to be a question for you. It's the question is, Jeremy, you mentioned a sample transfer instrument. Don't recall seeing any content during the presentation. Can you comment further on that instrument? That's our 7000. So Adam, if you're available, that would be a good time to jump in. If that doesn't work, then we'll get that answer to you.
Yeah, I hope I can be heard. Am I? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah, so MGI has very recently launched a new platform in the U.S., which is a sample transfer platform known as the STP 7000. It has the ability to do barcode scanning, decapping, sample aliquoting, and recapping. So essentially, it's the front end of the SP 960 process to really be able to take from sample collection tubes to array them into the format, into the 96 well format that's ready for the STP or for the SP 960s. So that platform can handle roughly 7,000 samples a day, depending on how you run your shifts. And that would kind of dovetail nicely into a lab that was running at least 2 960s, so sort of a 2-to-1 or possibly 3-to-1 sort of, or 1-to-3 or 2-to-1-to-2 in terms of the sample transfer platform. And we are actively installing the pilot versions of that in the U.S. and working with the international team to start getting those into the U.S. and into customers' hands.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Adam. Very helpful. I would not have answered that as elegantly. I'd say a related question, and I'll just touch on this briefly in the interest of time here. We have another 5 minutes. I think some of us can go longer if there are additional questions, but trying to respect everybody's time. One of the questions has to do with LDTs in the context of the partnership program. Obviously, our focus for this webinar and what Erik has implemented at TFL has been on the automated extraction system, the detection kit, and as well as the extraction kits, all of which are covered by the EUA. I did make the comment earlier about providing some technologies for labs doing their own LDTs. So if they're developing their own assays, and obviously that can go beyond COVID-19 assays. And I'm paraphrasing from the question here, but the point is that with partner labs interested in using the same components that we manufacture ourselves for our own kits, we have just started a program to make those components available. And as mentioned, it's critical enzymes. It can be the buffers, the master mixes, and even the DNTPs. So for those labs that are interested in the components, that is something that we're happy to talk to you about. Again, that would just be a direct question to me. Reach out, send me an email, and then I'd get anybody interested in touch with the right folks. So it's another question for Erik. I'll just read it out for everybody here. As you really ramp up, what are the bottlenecks that you see ahead of you?
That's a good question. So because we are responsible for providing the on-site staffing and the collection in many cases, we we do anticipate, and we've taken important steps towards ensuring that we have the proper staffing required given the demand that we're experiencing. So really the bottlenecks that we experience are kind of outside the lab, so to speak. From a lab standpoint, our partner has that very dialed. And again, going back to all the points that have been made on this call, we feel very confident that BGI and MGI will scale with us as we scale. But really, it's the PPE, it's the staffing, it's the collection itself that is kind of the biggest concern for us right now as the demand increases.
Okay, great. A question, I think, for the BGI MGI team about the PCR machines. Adam Euling, if I get in trouble here, feel free to jump in. I know that we have 3 instruments covered by the emergency use authorization. It's 2 thermo instruments and one Roche instrument. The Roche instrument is the Light Cycler 480. For the thermo instrument, I believe it's the 7500 Fast and the Quant Studio 12. So let's do a live fact check and see if that comes close.
For the Quant Studio is Quant Studio 5.
Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for the correction. So Quant Studio 5 and the 7500 Fast, correct, for thermo?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question about the limit of detection. Since I got the Quant Studio instrument wrong, maybe I shouldn't touch that one. I have a guess, but I'll see if the technical team has that one live. From somebody else jumping in here, it's 100 copies per mil. So let's go with that answer for now, but if we need to put some parameters around that, given sample type or other sample volume, then we'll get that out to the person who asked the question. From an anonymous attendee, what's the throughput of the 960 and the 7000? I'm going to ask Adam to jump in for that one.
Yeah, sure, Jeremy. So the throughput of the 960 in running in its 2-plate mode is 192 samples in about 80 minutes, depending on some options in your workflow. The STP 7000 will process those same 192 samples in about 40 minutes. The reason that I say the STP 7000 could maybe support more than 2 instruments at 2 SPs at a time is it can run a little bit more continuously, since it can just kind of continuously feed samples into it. The SP960 is more of a run-oriented thing where it would require a setup time and a takedown time. So generally, 2 to 1 is a good ratio, but I mean, depending on how slick you can make your workflow, sort of a 3 to 1, or just really depending on how many samples you're looking at processing a day and how smooth your sample supply chain is coming into that. The STP 7000 will do 192 samples in about 40 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Adam. Another question, if I order your end-to-end lab workflow, including kits and instruments, how soon will I be ready to start testing in my lab? Actually, I think that's kind of a jump ball too. The sort of glib answer is, well, it depends. I would say the more serious answer from the technology side of things is, as mentioned, we can get the instruments and the reagents to the lab pretty quickly. We do the installation and the training. That can happen sometimes even within a week. Again, depending on what the lab wants to do. And then it's a matter of what the lab feels obliged to do in terms of validation and submission. So at what point the lab would consider itself up and running sort of depends on their own internal processes once we've done the installation. Again, access to the technology isn't necessarily the issue, or I think even the longest part of that. It's probably more internal lab processes. I don't know, Erik, if you want to comment on that. I know you're not working in the lab yourself, and you're on mute, just as an aside.
Yeah. No, I think so. It's been a while since we first got up and running. So while I can't recall exactly the timeline, I do know that it was very quick in terms of getting the kits had arrived and then going through the proper laboratory procedures to be fully up and running. It was a very quick process. I think we waited no more than a week to get the automation instrument. Again, this was back when things were really quite dire, and we were operational in very short order.
Great. I'm looking at the Q&A, and I'm looking at the clock. I think we've handled the questions right now. So if there's a last-minute question, feel free to get it in. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap up here. Pretty much right on time, which seldom happens. So definitely, I want to thank you, Erik, for your preparation and participation and providing, I think, some excellent insights into some of those who've joined us for this webinar. I certainly want to thank the BGI MGI team who got us ready to pull this off and provide the support. So that's much appreciated. And then of course everybody who joined. Again, it's excellent to see. I think we had more hundreds of folks register. It was great to see excellent attendance, and hopefully this information was useful. And as mentioned, if there's interested in the technology or the process, please feel free to send an email to myself, Erik, or both of us. With that, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.